Today, we'll focus on a story of making the familiar unfamiliar. But before we get to that story, let's introduce the characters.
I am an Islamic banker.
I am a capitalist.
Today, we're going to talk about Katie, a girl who had her house foreclosed when she was 12. She underwent homelessness, among many other things, after the housing crisis of 2008. This was largely due to the capitalistic banking system, which only cared about maximizing profit. But what if there was another form of financial institution which did not just operate for profit as the basis of its operation? In this video, we will explore some of the cultural values of Katie's life and a system which challenges normal financial capitalist norms.
In Islamic banking, we believe in a system of zakat. We believe that individuals that are able should provide a percentage of their income for a charitable cause.
Let's pause here for a second. So did the banker just say that Islamic banks believe those in need should receive more and there should be a more equal distribution of income? The answer is yes. Islamic banks follow the fundamentals of Islam, and zakat is one of the pillars of the religion. It says those who can must donate a percentage of their earnings for charitable purposes. Therefore, these type of banks actually help contribute to lessen social problems. If such banks existed to Katie, maybe she would have had to suffer less. But all of this begs a more important question.
Why do capitalist methods of banking not incorporate these philanthropic ideals?
The real reason is just because capitalists really believe that if you're going to donate something, you're going to give something, you want something back. So when we give it to our so-called charitable donations to any institution, we expect some sort of profit or something else back that would benefit us in the long run. So when we talk about a binding agreement like zakat, like you said, the reality of it is that it doesn't necessarily bring back any help to us. It only allows us to go for a one-way transaction rather than a two-way agreement.
The capitalist perception might seem harsh, but is justified according to his belief. However, if you're in the shoes of the Islamic banker, all of the reasons the capitalist says might seem quite strange. Let's go through some of the other aspects of the capitalist banking system in regards to Katie's story, which may seem unfamiliar to the Islamic banker.
Salam is a conception of time and property. Simply put, it is payment now for a delivery later. For example, people normally buy houses in mortgages, which adds up to more than the actual value of the house. We believe that if the buyer can pay the house value before delivery, then he should not have to pay anything else, even if the house price fluctuates when it becomes ready for delivery.
Let's pause again. The banker just explained another key concept of buy salam. Now let us look at this from the perspective of Katie's story. Her parents always wanted a house, and when the opportunity came, they took on a house by taking a subprime loan. So the capitalist world they lived in allowed them to pay later with interest, which led them to incurring the debt. But what if they had an option of applying the principle of buy salam? They would have perhaps afforded a smaller house or a house later rather than sooner, but they would not have been in debt. Let's look at the capitalist point of view now.
Why do capitalists believe otherwise?
Because when we think about the two different perspectives, capitalists truly believe that they want to maximize profit. So when they're trying to sell a house to any homeowner that is intending to buy that specific house, they want to see benefit in themselves over just the market value of the house, which means not only does the money go towards paying the complete house, it should also go towards them because of the services that they provide, which is where their services should be incorporated, and that's why there's such a larger amount of money on a capitalist point of view than this point of view.
Once again, the capitalist explains why buy salam would not work in his world, which unfortunately happens to be the same world Katie lives in. Let's move on to another analysis of the cultural value of Katie's story and how the Islamic banker would view this. But before that, let's introduce the theme of what we're going to talk about next.
Well, it's important to know when you sign your contract, you're binding yourself into purchasing that property. So too is the vendor when he or she signs their part of it. There is no way out of that contract unless you are let out by the vendor. It is very important that you're fully aware of what you're doing when you're signing a contract. It is effectively, in a property transaction, the point of no return.
Or so he says.
In Islamic banking, we have a concept called Qiyar al-Shart, where both parties in a contract have the option to rescind an otherwise binding contract within a certain period of time.
Once again, we see how there is a difference between the contracts in conventional and Islamic banking. Katie's parents had a subprime loan, which was one of the conventional binding contracts. Initially, that loan had a low interest rate for the first 2 years, but after that, the rate spiked up unimaginably. Now, imagine if Katie's parents were in the Islamic bankers world, they would have had the option to turn back the subprime loan when they started noticing the danger signs. Again, we must ask ourselves an important question.
Why is it that capitalists don't follow this type of method?
The reason basically is because when you have a contract with two parties, the whole focus of it is to try to still maintain that idea that you want the maximum amount of opportunity, the maximum amount of profit from the contract as much as possible. So in the event that the contract goes haywire or doesn't go exactly as planned, they should be able to rescind themselves from the contract in order to ensure that they're still up in profit rather than declining in the amount of money supply that they have.
But the Islamic banker now has another question regarding this.
The capitalist system also allows you to sell your contracts, which allows you to sell your risks. If someone owned 60% of a restaurant and decided to sell his share, he would get a commission while also getting rid of his risks. Why do capitalists allow individuals to sell that contract to other consumers? In Qiyar al-Shart, the consumer is protected because we do not allow the selling of these contracts.
Well, because when you sell a contract, you don't always have to just keep it where it's only one party that can control it. You can also have other parties and sell it to other parties in order to make sure that while you're still maintaining the business and still trying to ensure that all parties, are, including yourself, are satisfied, you want to make sure that you're still keeping the amount of profit that you can obtain as well. So when you're thinking in this example of a partnership, if one of the partners decides to sell, you want to make sure that you gain the maximum amount of profit, minimizing the risk and ensuring that the business is still continuous.
As we see, the capitalist always sticks to his notion of profit maximization, which is the core belief of capitalism. Now, here's one thing we must understand, that banks, I mean the conventional banks, make most of their money off interest. But now we'll investigate what Islamic banking thinks of this interest. In general, interest is the cost of borrowing or the profit of lending for conventional banking. In Islamic banking, there are many injunctions against interest called riba. But I must emphasize that riba is widely a contested topic in Islam, but the part we are going to focus on is how riba does not have any injunctions against the role of time to determine the value of an object. Rather, Islamic banking champions this concept. This can be seen in Katie's story when her father was forced to sell a motorbike which he spent years building. It is safe to assume that the order to get quick money, he probably sold his bike for a lesser value than he would have sold otherwise, and this is prohibited in Islamic banking because they want to make sure the consumers are not exploited. These were some of the cultural values of Katie's life I wanted to portray, and how indeed there was a system of banking which undermines the capitalist ideology which she was a part of. In the prompt, Katie, for a majority of her life, blamed her parents for their housing getting foreclosed. But the truth is, it was not really her parents' fault. It was the fault of the larger culture of finance that she was a part of, and it is through the conversation between the capitalist and Islamic banker I wanted to bring to light the broader context of the issue.